Welcome to the PRI video series. This is video number 1 in the series, which will provide a history and overview of the PRI Belt Drive System. This overview will provide high-level details of the components that comprise the system, which includes the custom machine components as well as the off-the-shelf commercial items. Before we jump into the overview, I want to give you some background and history on the system and briefly explain how it came to be. This endeavor started back around the fall of 2013 when I was searching for my next bike. I had been researching internally geared hubs for quite some time, and I always wanted to try them out. So I pulled the trigger and purchased my first 29er, which was a new specialized stump jumper comp hardtail. I outfitted it with the Shimano Alpine 8-speed internally geared hub. It was a match made in heaven, and I instantly fell in love with it. In fact, I loved it so much that I told myself that I would never ride with a derailleur type setup again. Now, fast forward to 2017. It was yet time for another bike. This time I wanted to cross over to the dark side and go full suspension, but there was one little problem. Almost all full suspension bikes at that time utilized a through axle setup in the rear. Now, why was this an issue, you might ask? Well, it's because Shimano internally geared hubs are only offered in a solid axle configuration. Now, for most people, this would have been viewed as a showstopper. However, I'm not like most people, and I was not going to settle. 2 months later, the through axle conversion system was born, and Black Widow emerged. Black Widow was amazing and probably the best thing since sliced bread. I was pretty happy and content for a short while, until one day my chain broke yet again and I had a really close call. I was completely fed up with chains. I was tired of them making noise, derailing, braking, slapping. I had enough. Now, prior to the creation of Black Widow, I had heard about the Gates carbon drive system, and I thought it would be awesome to have a belt-driven bike. However, at that time, the system was only available on a handful of purpose-built commuter and hardtail mountain bikes. So I figured I would just patiently wait and see what the future would bring. Well, the future was here, and it was time to see if anything new was available. Turns out that Nikolai, a German bike manufacturer, made a belt-driven full suspension mountain bike that used a belt tensioner. Unfortunately, it was a purpose-built bike which utilized an unconventional frame design that was built around a pinion gearbox and a single pulley tensioner. It had a cool factor to it because it had a belt drive, but it didn't really blow my dress up. And I didn't want to be tied to one manufacturer. I was after something that could be used on any bike. Although the Nikolai bike wasn't what I was looking for, it did, however, spark my creativity, and I came up with an idea. With a lot of determination, persistence, and pounding my head against the keyboard multiple times, the stars had all aligned. 2 years later, my idea had become a reality, and the first prototype PRI Belt Drive System was installed on Black Widow. Words couldn't describe it. It was purely magical. It was smooth, it was quiet, it was simply amazing. Never again would I use a chain. The rest is history. So let me explain why I like the Shimano Alpine 11-speed hub and prefer it over the roll-off speed hub and Kindernay XIV. First, let me say that at the time I built Black Widow, there were only 2 choices available: the speed hub and the Alpine. The Kindernay XIV did not enter the market until 2017. However, I'm going to include it in this part of the discussion. The first thing that I like about the Alpine hub is that it only requires a single cable and shifter to actuate the shifting mechanism. Both the Kindernay and Roll-Off, on the other hand, require 2 cables, and depending upon which option you choose, it may require 2 shifters, one for upshifting and one for downshifting. From an aesthetics and cable management perspective, the Alphine is clearly the way to go, as it's far easier to deal with one cable when utilizing internal cable routing, as most bikes don't have a spare passageway, especially since the advent of dropper post. As you can see here, all three setups have very clean cable routing, with Red Thunder having the cleanest and almost unnoticeable setup in my opinion. The second thing that I like about the Alphine hub is the rotor mounting interface. As I mentioned earlier, it has a centerlock interface, which through the use of a centerlock adapter allows me to use any rotor I prefer. Unfortunately, it's a different story for both the Rohloff and Kindernay, as they both have a proprietary bolt pattern which requires the use of their OEM rotor. The third thing that I like about the Alphine hub is that it's super quiet under load. It's virtually silent. Now, I have never had the pleasure of testing out the Kindernay or the Rohloff hubs and cannot attest to this, but word around the campfire is that the Rohloff hub is noisy in gears 1 through 7. The Kindernay is supposedly quieter than the Rohloff, but it does exhibit some noise. The fourth thing that I like about the Alphine 11-speed hub, which makes it the most attractive, is the cost. At $450, it's roughly 1/3 the cost of the Kindernay and 1/4 that of the Rohloff. For comparison, SRAM cassettes range in price from $100 for the NX all the way to $460 for the XX1. The fifth and last thing that I like about the Alphine hub is its serviceability. It's very easy to service, and most of the individual parts and tools needed to service it are readily available from online retailers, including the complete internal assembly, which costs about $330. Therefore, I can easily service it myself and quickly drop it into assembly if needed. Things are a little different with Rohloff. Their hubs are known for their reliability. However, in a rare instance that a problem does arise, you are forced to send it in for service at the factory in Germany. Unfortunately, with all the good comes the bad. With that said, there are two things that I don't like about the Alphine hub. The first thing that I don't like is the reliability of the seals. The Alphine hubs in general are reliable, however, their seal reliability is somewhat questionable and hit or miss. To date, I have owned 4 hubs, one 8-speed and 3 11-speed, one of which is the early model SGS 700, and the remainder are the later model SG S7001-11, which are e-bike rated. My first hub was an 8-speed model SGS 501 and was installed on Big Red. After 7 years, the drive side dust cap seal started leaking, which was definitely not premature. Overall, this hub way surpassed my expectations. Word around the campfire is that the Alphine 8-speed is the most reliable of the entire Shimano line of internally geared hubs. My second hub is an 11-speed model SGS 700 and is installed on Black Widow. After 5 years of hard riding, one of the drive side seals started leaking and it suffered a few broken gear teeth on the number 2 carrier unit. After removing the broken teeth, it still functioned fine. However, I went ahead and replaced the entire cartridge assembly. As with the 8-speed hub, this one also surpassed my expectations and further increased my faith and confidence in Shimano products. My third hub is an 11-speed model SGS 7001-11 and was installed on Red Thunder. Unexpectedly, it started leaking from what appeared to be the driver plate seal on the drive side after approximately 75 hours. This was somewhat premature and caused me to take a step back and question my confidence in Shimano, but I just chalked it up to being an isolated incident. My fourth hub is an 11-speed SGS 7001-11 as well, and is installed on Scotty. Much to my surprise, after only about 25 hours, the same thing happened to it. Now, this was extremely premature and not just a coincidence in my opinion. After this occurred, I started doing some research and found that this apparently is a common problem. However, it's unclear to me what the failure rate is and if it's only common to the newer model hub. The 2 internal assemblies for my third and fourth hubs were replaced with older version cartridge assemblies since the newer model versions were not available at the time. I will report back on their reliability after I get some hours on them. Overall, I still think they are reliable and offer an excellent value. Now, with all that said, the leaking seals are not a big issue if you have a chain set up. However, if you have a belt set up and you don't catch it right away, the leaking oil can mix with the dirt, grime, sand, and wear particles from the sprocket, and it creates a greasy-like paste mixture that can contaminate the belt and cause accelerated wear on the sprockets. I can attest from experience that this is a tedious and time-consuming process to remove. The second thing I don't like is that it's only offered in a solid axle configuration. Unfortunately, the complete line of Shimano hubs were only intended to fit onto urban commuter bikes that are equipped with slotted dropouts, and were never intended to be used for mountain bike applications. To overcome this, I determined that there were two problems that needed to be solved. The first problem was how to fit the hub into the dropouts. The second was how to mount and properly restrain the hub. To solve the first problem, I did two things. First, I modified the hub by removing 10 millimeters from both sides of the axle, as shown in the animation. Second, I developed a method to fit the modified hub into the dropouts. The method in question basically involves tilting the wheel in place while spreading the rear triangle apart slightly, which can be seen in the animation. To solve the second problem, I created the through-axle conversion system, which is shown in the animation and will be covered in more detail in the component overview.